On last week's episode of WrestleRank, your standard Road Warrior knockoffs looks like they got mixed together with My Little Pony. What a brush! Hello everybody, and welcome to the VGWA. I'm Cobretti.
And if you forgot who I was, I'm Wally.
Welcome back, Wally.
Thank you. I know you missed me, but on with the show.
And thank you for joining us, and welcome back to WrestleRank, as we continue to play through all the console wrestling video games.
But first, I'm going to kick back a little bit and just let it all copy and paste over. I mean, other people do it.
Wally, sit your ass up. You've already had enough of a break. We can't do that to our viewers. In this episode, we will be looking at Pro Wrestling for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Before you say, what more could be said about this video game that has been covered already, we will be including additional articles and interviews from foreign magazines that, to our knowledge, have not been included in English reviews. And hey Wally, guess what?
What? I really like surprises.
There's actually a commercial this time.
ねえ、あなた、ヒロシたちがね、プロレス始めたみたい。いやー！
5人の敵をマットに這わせ、リングの魔王プーマを引きずり出せ。大技小技場外乱闘に狂気攻撃まで飛び出して、気分はすっかりリングサイド。今度はプロレス。
私は誰の挑戦でも受ける。
やればやるほどディスクシステム。
Well, if the tag team wrestling commercial confused you, I really don't know what to make of this one. As the parent, aren't you supposed to be the one screaming, "Hey, why don't you get off that damn furniture?"
Ah, that was a flashback from my youth there. Thanks, Cobretti.
And if you notice in the commercial, it was released on the Famicom Disk System in Japan. Arg, methinks life got easier.
Don't copy that floppy.
Pro Wrestling was first released in Japan in October 13th, 1986, and later released in the United States in March 1987. Since the two versions are nearly identical, the US version is the version that most people will be playing, and we're ranking this game as a 1987 game. Originally slated to be a port of Mapmania Exciting Hour for the NES, the game was ultimately cancelled in that form. And rising up from the ashes like the phoenix was Masada Masuda, who would later become the godfather of wrestling video games. He would be hired to develop a game to expand the Nintendo Sports series to include wrestling. Masuda and another colleague formed a two-man team and used the framework of Mapmania to back engineer or influence the new game.
You know, I'm starting to think this other colleague is me, but people can't remember his name either.
I'm Cobretti.
And I'm the other colleague.
Influences included the control scheme, an outside ring cameraman, a referee, and the animations between the two games being very similar.
And the announce team. You can't forget Krillin, who's sitting right there. But what about the crowd? What about Man? And all the other awesome characters in there.
But this wasn't just a straight port. Additional small touches were added as well. The referee was also updated to have a basic AI as well. Whenever a pinfall is attempted, the referee must run to the ring location of the wrestlers, lie on his stomach, and begin the 3 count.
But didn't Howard Finkel run over in Mapmania?
Hey now, I don't flaunt your failures in front of you. I have to uphold my outstanding reputation of being incorrect.
But I guess they realized Howard Finkel is actually an announcer.
Cul-de-sac Club for life. Previously, the NES and Famicom had been releasing a set of sports-related titles, such as soccer, baseball, and ice hockey. These games were fairly basic, yet fun takes on popular sports. With Pro Wrestling, Masuda
and the other colleague
had pushed the genre past these arcade-based titles by providing gameplay that is moving more towards simulation. However, still remaining fun.
One day, WWE 2K will figure that part out.
Featuring an expanded moveset, up to 12 moves and one special move for each character, this game was something the video game world had not seen yet for a wrestling game, nearly doubling the moveset of previous attempts of wrestling games while maintaining the feel of wrestling.
12 moves? That's 2 5 moves of doom. Put John Cena versus Bret Hart in a match. If you add 3 more, you have Hogan.
It felt like it was combining the best of Mapmania mixed in with tag team wrestling.
So does that include some really awesome background music?
I know I'm going to catch some flack for this. While the soundtrack was good, it was no tag team wrestling. Each wrestler was designed with the criteria in mind that they were going to either be a heel or face. Masuda
And the other colleague.
stated that he had immersed himself in wrestling and was mainly focused in All Japan Pro Wrestling at the time. Being impressed by the display of Giant Baba and Abdullah the Butcher, Masuda
And the other colleague.
then felt he understood the importance of villains in wrestling.
So what's the importance of a villain in wrestling? Or as we call him nowadays, a heel. I mean, King Kong Bundy drew just as much as Andre the Giant, right? Everybody remembers WrestleMania 2 just as much as WrestleMania 3.
Well, let's see. King Kong Bundy, Roddy Piper, and Andre the Giant. Sure, totally interchangeable. Masuda
And the other colleague.
felt that players yearned to have an experience to be the bad guy while gaming, and wanted there to be equal representation of heroic and villainous characters. Character design would further be fleshed out with each of the characters having different attributes compared to one another. Would you play as the quicker high flyer with plenty of stamina that dishes out less damage, or slower powerhouse that can bring the pain? Okay, who are we kidding? We all knew we played as the same wrestler.
Damn Skippy, we all played as Starman.
You could see the influence of Mat Mania in the grappling system, but you no longer needed to wear down your opponent with strikes before initiating a grapple. Although the strike and grapple system had now been replaced by a proximity-based grappling system, this did not mean that the stamina system was gone. You still had to wear down your opponents before performing bigger moves, such as brainbusters or pile drivers. The grappling system of a grapple plus direction and a button to perform a move was the beginning of modern-day wrestling games. Although this is the archaic beginnings, this is still a system being used today in 2K games and soon to be released AEW Fight Forever.
It goes to show that Matsuda and colleague are still an influence in today's wrestling video games.
It is hard to believe that such an influential game would receive such mediocre scores in the reviews. While Famitsu ranked the game fairly well for their scoring system, awarding it a Silver Hall of Fame, the game did not fare too well in other reviews, especially outside of Japan, with magazines such as Ace giving it 794 points out of 1,000, and Computer and Video Games assigning it an abysmal score of 5 out of 10.
And I call this video game ignorance. They didn't really play the game.
With the expanded moveset, improved graphics, and sound design, it seems like concessions would have had to been made, like tag team wrestling with fewer wrestlers to select from. Although less than the 8 characters to select from in Kinnikuman, there are 6 selectable wrestlers in pro wrestling with one final boss.
A concession was made to eliminate tag team. Unlike the tag team wrestling game in Kinnikuman, they went with a straight one-on-one match.
So yes, there was the elimination of the tag team feature, but there was an improvement of this game beyond Mat Mania. The inclusion of 1 versus 1 and a second player. So everybody probably knows who these 6 wrestlers are, and generally who their counterparts in real life are.
You mean like the Nature Boy, Ric Flair?
I'm gonna do a quick take and disagree with some of the more established guesses on who these wrestlers are supposed to be. Okay, Wally. Fighter Hayabusa, Antonio Inoki. I agree.
Well, there's one we both agree on.
Mil Mascaras as Starman? I guess so. Maybe in moveset only, but visually, he kind of looks like the masked superstar.
My opinion, anybody who was a high flyer with a mask could fit that role for Starman. And King Corn Khan reminds me of Killer Khan.
Somebody who wants to be a wrestler, nobody wants to pick. The Khan he reminds me of is Tony Khan. Okay, so here's where my picks differ from most people. The Giant Panther. Most people tried to say that he is Kerry Von Erich. I do believe he is a member of the Von Erich family, but I think he closer resembles Kevin Von Erich, especially with Kevin Von Erich having matches in Japan around this time.
I disagree. I think it's Kerry Von Erich that he looks like.
Another popular opinion that I disagree with is that the Amazon is unattributed to any wrestler. I think the Amazon is actually based off Abdullah the Butcher, given that how Masuda and colleague mentioned that they were watching wrestling and were influenced by his matches, with the inclusion of his hardcore wrestling style, showing the bloody biting of the head and stabbing his opponent with a fork. While it may not look like Abdullah the Butcher, he is definitely influenced by him.
You know, Cobretti, you have opened my eyes to a new view of the Amazon. Thank you very much.
Which leaves us with the last playable character, King Slender. And I agree, he is the Nature Boy, Ric Flair.
It's definitely not Hulk Hogan.
Brother. Now on to the final boss, the Great Puma. Do you really think he's Tiger Mask? He has the attributes of all the wrestlers, and other than Tiger and Puma, are there any similarities between the two?
How would you know? We never got to the end.
We could never quite master that 20-second ring out count for the last two matches to meet Great Puma. And Great Puma was considered to be one of the most difficult Nintendo bosses of all time. He was hard. Nintendo hard. Aw, snap! These fools think we're soft. Hey, TurboGrafx, I think it's time we go hard. Hard, just like a Mike Tyson jab. Hard, like defusing bombs in the dam. Hard, like turbo tunnels in Battletoads. Hard, like navigating Crystal Lake Road. Hard, like a cheap Rescue Rangers 2. Harder than hard, cause Nintendo's harder than you. We appreciate it if you helped us out.
Why don't you smash that like button with a chair and power bomb that subscribe button?
And stick it to the man and help us defeat the algorithm. And then you'll get notified of all our content featuring wrestling video games. All this put together ended up being a winning recipe for a Nintendo Sports Series game. Not quite as popular as platformer titles, ProWrestling performed well in sales in Japan as well as the US. Famitsu magazine was flooded with tips and tricks to the game shortly after its release, providing a well-deserved recognition for wrestling games at the time. Both previous games, Kinnikuman Muscle Tag Match and Tag Team Wrestling, had received minimum coverage in the media. But don't worry, we're making up for lost time at the VGWA and covering Kinnikuman whenever we can. I'm the VGWA, brought to you by Kinnikuman.
Don't worry about your Hogan trunks. We cover Kinnikuman just like Ravishing Rick Rude's tights.
ProWrestling received a review, an 8-page feature, and even a comic in Famitsu.
Famitsu covered pro wrestling like IGN covers deals.
Top 5 big screen TVs over $5,000. Click the link below. Please note that we may receive a portion of these sales. Since this was prior to Nintendo Power, one of the only sources for US games actually was Famitsu. Famitsu reported that Pro Wrestling was in the US top 10 selling software starting in issue 23, May 1987, until issue 32, September 1987. More impressively, the Japanese release would periodically remain in Famitsu magazine all the way up to issue 85 in October 1989, as part of the top Disksoft software titles. This included surviving the RPG mania sweeping Japan at the time. This game had an impressive run. When we got to sit down and actually play this game, I really enjoyed it.
It is one of the best single-player and couch co-op games you could have played, even to this day.
I will give it the slight critique that when playing against the computer, you're either still doing that shoulder butt,
Spam, 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 spam.
or you're trying to win by 20-second countout.
Sometimes you gotta cheat to win.
But the majority of the matches against the CPU are actually quite enjoyable. The game is very economical, with plenty of cheap copies available to pick up, and has the additional bonus of being added to the NES collection on the Nintendo Switch Online library.
So if you have an NES you want to play this game on, you can get this game as cheap as $5. Or if you have a Switch, you're probably already playing for the online service. So play it for free that way.
Graphics, sound design, gameplay, it's all there. I rate Pro Wrestling as a great game.
And like Cobretti, I rate Pro Wrestling for the NES a great game.
While it is rated a great game, where does it stand in our rankings? I put Pro Wrestling for the Nintendo Entertainment System at the top of the list.
And that's where it belongs, at the top of the list.
And so your new VGWA champion, Pro Wrestling for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And now, holding 2 belts, in addition to being the VGWA champion, the new TV champion, Pro Wrestling for the Nintendo Entertainment System for Best Budget Game. And still holding on strong to those tag team belts is Tag Team Wrestling for the Nintendo Entertainment System. So make sure to join us next time as we discuss if we should be worried about AEW delayed forever.
Blood! I want blood to cover the ring!